In today's video, we're taking a look at some trade talk involving the Vancouver Canucks as well as the Chicago Blackhawks. The future of Bo Horvat and Jonathan Toews will be discussed. It also sounds like the Maple Leafs are very interested in a long-term deal with Michael Bunting. We also have some more news from the NHL waiver wire, some signings from around the league, and another This Day in Hockey History moment we want to discuss as well. All that coming up next. Welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have a variety of NHL news and rumors to take a look at here today. First up, before we get into the news, I just want to do a quick This Day in Hockey History moment. It was on this day 6 years ago that the Auston Matthews debut took place. The Toronto Maple Leafs versus the Ottawa Senators, and Auston Matthews had one of the most historical, dominant performances as a debut in sports history, really scoring 4 goals. He scored actually on his first 3 shots. Quite a performance. I remember the game like it was yesterday. Unfortunately for the Leafs, they ended up losing 5-4. So it was the Sens 5, Matthews 4. Nobody else from the Leafs put one in that night. But regardless of that, I mean, it's what a way to open up your NHL career, scoring 4 goals, and he's never really looked back. Been a goal-scoring threat ever since. I thought it was a good time to bring this up, obviously, because it's this day 6 years ago. But I know tonight, where we have a larger slate of games on the NHL schedule, we're going to have a good amount of NHL young players making their NHL debuts here tonight as well, including first overall pick Jerard Fagerberg. So be interesting to see if we get anything anywhere close to that. I mean, 4 goals in your first game is pretty much, like I said, it's an unheard of feat. Scoring 1 goal in your first game is pretty awesome, let alone 3 or 4. So be interesting to see if any of these youngsters making their debut here over the next few days as all the teams get their first games out of the way, come anywhere close to that historical one that we saw 6 years ago. NHL news from the waiver wire. We had another claim based on players there yesterday. Jonas Johansson, the goaltender, is going back to Colorado. Of course, he started with the Avs, was claimed by the Coyotes. Then they picked up Connor Ingram, decided to put him back on waivers, and the Avalanche, since he came from there, had first dibs, and they were able to reclaim him, and they can also assign him to the minors without having to go any further, so he can make it down to the Colorado Eagles team and stay put for a while. So Jonas Johansson's little journey on the waiver wire should come to an end for an extended time, of course, unless I need to get him called up here at some point later on in the season. It could happen again, but we'll see if their goalies stay healthy. It may not be needed. We do have some new players on waivers today. Nobody that I would suspect that is likely to get claimed. A couple of players that don't have much experience, including the Calgary Flames and Martin Popisil. Tampa Bay Lightning, Pierre-Cedric Labrie. Of course, they just signed Labrie, who had been playing. Like I mentioned, he played in a variety of leagues, including the NHL in Tampa a number of years ago. He's in his 30s now. I can't foresee him getting picked up. And then the Sharks have defenseman Scott Harrington. Maybe, I guess, but Harrington just got a contract with the Sharks off a PTO. And I guess for now, they'd rather assign him to the Barracuda. Now, also today, we found out longtime NHL defenseman Andy Greene, who's now 39, signed a one-day deal with the New Jersey Devils, where he played the bulk of his career and was a longtime captain, to retire as a Devil. So Andy Greene is calling it a career. We kind of suspected that was going to happen. I know he and Jerard both played the last few years with the New York Islanders. And of course, it seems like both guys at the end of last season on Long Island, it was I heard speculation they were both going to retire. We saw Jerard go back and do a one-day deal with the Bruins, and now Greene goes back to the Devils. Of course, he played his entire career, a majority of it, of course, under Lou Lamoriello from his time in New Jersey, and then, of course, on Long Island as well. Got 1,057 games played, only put up 264 points, but Greene was really not known for his offensive capabilities. Also appeared in 90 playoff games, and overall, I must say, had a pretty solid NHL career. Pretty durable defenseman back there. I do believe that the New Jersey Devils home opener, there will be an acknowledgement, and I think a small tribute to Greene as well, to acknowledge his retirement. So great on Andy Greene for a great career, and certainly wish him the best in whatever comes next for him. We got some big signings in Buffalo today. We got news early this morning that the Buffalo Sabres were extending head coach Don Granato. Don Granato, I think it's fair to say, since he's taken over the reins there, has done a pretty good job. We got reports, though, because we don't always have all the full details on coaching contracts. That information is not made as public as player stuff, because obviously there's no salary cap on front office stuff or executives, coaches, and all that kind of off-ice staff. So a lot of it doesn't need to be public, and for that reason, we don't get everything. NHL insiders do dig up some of the details, but that's about it. But we did get word from Pierre LeBrun that apparently he was not entering the final year of his deal. He still had the coming season that's starting now and one more, and he's been extended for 2 beyond that. So he's now under contract for 4 seasons, counting the one that's just getting underway here now. So like I said, a lot of coaching contracts are 3 to 5 years, so that's not really that unusual. I think obviously they started small and he's done well. They're happy with the progress, especially with the young players. So for me, I think this makes a lot of sense to keep him around, give him a good solid 3-4 year run there to see what he can do in Buffalo before there's really much of a consideration of going in a different direction. But the Buffalo Sabres, the bigger contract announcement today was that they were signing young defenseman Mattias Samuelson to a 7-year, $30 million deal. Which was, for some people, quite shocking and surprising, considering his limited amount of NHL experience. Of course, Samuelson is a big guy, 6'4", 220 pounds, big rugged defenseman. Was a second-round pick in 2018. He's only appeared in 54 games. Now, of course, since 2018, he did play a couple years of U.S. college hockey, a little bit of time in the minors, and then he split basically the last couple of years with limited time in NHL and American Hockey League. In 54 games, he's got 12 assists, no goals. I heard some people commenting on the fact that a player with 0 goals get a 7-year deal, but he's not expected to really score. He's expected to be a second pair rugged defender. That's what he is. He's a guy that Don Granato basically said that he's the solution to help shut down other teams' more offensive players. So they look at him as being a part of their shutdown defense pair, and they see him as being a big part of the team's core moving forward. Now, he's 22 years old, so I understand and I will agree that there is some risk associated with this deal. It's no different than what I said about Tage Thompson. Tage Thompson came off a massive year last year, a bit of a late blooming breakout season, and then they extended him to a massive long-term deal worth even more money, way more money than this. And, I guess if they're confident and they feel like he can keep up with that, I understand. They're getting ahead of it before the price goes up any higher. So I know some teams are more fond of bridge deals. Some teams like the longer-term deals. But to be honest, I think that teams should be taking more of a chance on a player that's young, coming out of their ELC, more so than a veteran that's 29, 30, giving them those long-term deals. Those ones don't turn out as well most often. To be honest, if Mattias Samuelson lives up to his expectations, the risk is going to be more so on the player than the team. I think right now the way he's projecting, in a couple of years' time, this is going to look like a real sweetheart of a deal. The Sabres will be quite happy to have a second pair defenseman on this kind of a contract for several more years. Now, of course, if it doesn't work out, could there be something here that goes bad? Absolutely. You get these long-term contracts, there's always that possibility. But like I said, I think you're seeing a trend of a changing of the guard where teams are starting to bet more on their young players as they're coming out of their ELCs. They're getting the money more up front than they're getting in, because before you used to see a trend where they would get it more at the end. You had to be more established getting into your UFA years before you could get that big money deal, whereas it's kind of trending the other way now. So yes, there's risk. It could be bad. Same with the Thompson contract, but they're trying to get their core guys that they see as being a big part of the future locked up. And for what he brings, if he can be a second pair defenseman that plays 20 minutes a night and is capable of defending and making it hard on the other opponent's top players to score on them, and he's defending well, that will be well worth the money. So I don't have an issue with the contract, but at the same time, I will acknowledge there's definitely some risk there. The Boston Bruins also made a signing today, signing veteran defenseman Anton Stralman, who was there on a PTO. Of course, the PTO was something they agreed to late in the camp. And of course, they probably want to wait and get through the opening night roster adjustments before getting this contract figured out. But it's a 1-year, $1 million veteran deal. A little bit surprising. Most of the guys on PTOs end up taking deals that were $750,000, $800,000, but they go with 1 year, $1 million for Anton Stralman. The Boston Bruins also seem to have a couple of guys like Foligno and Mike Riley who did clear waivers. Don't appear to have sent down to Providence. I know Chris Wagner was. They still seem to be with the NHL roster. and I'm not sure what their status is for playing in the first game tonight, but they are still with the big club. Now on to some other action. Of course, we got some more NHL games last night. It was opening night in North America. We saw the New York Rangers and Tampa Bay Lightning kick things off early. It was a great game, I thought. Rangers really took it to the Lightning. Mika Zibanejad scored a couple goals, including a shorthanded one, and really got things kicked off quite well. The late game saw the Vegas Golden Knights really take it to LA. Obviously, there was a ton of shots in that game as well. Vegas put up, I think it was over 50 shots. Logan Thompson was good enough to get the victory. Mark Stone scored the game winner. Stone looked good. He looks healthy. Eichel looked dangerous. Was buzzing all night. Had like 7-8 shots. Vegas looked really good. If I'm the Pacific teams, I'm a little worried now about Vegas. I wasn't sure how they were going to come out, and they seem to be trying. I mean, it's one game. You don't want to have an early season overreaction, but in that one game, things went well. LA looked pretty good too, but I would say that Vegas is going to be a handful for those teams in that division. Now, of course, on tonight's slate, we have 6 games, including the Habs and Leafs and the Oilers and Canucks, a couple of games of top Canadian teams. Obviously, Habs and Leafs will be prominent tonight on Sportsnet, followed by the other game is a doubleheader for those of you watching in Canada. You've also got the Jackets and Canes doing battle, Caps and Bruins, Ducks and Kraken, as well as the Avalanche raising their Stanley Cup banner tonight as they host the Chicago Blackhawks. Of course, former Avalanche last year in Cup champion Jack Johnson, now with a member of the Hawks, will be in the house to be able to witness that as well. Of course, we saw the other night where the Avalanche received their Stanley Cup rings at a special dinner and presentation. If you didn't see that online, lots of pictures. The rings look absolutely pretty awesome and pretty gorgeous. So we'll take a look at that online if you haven't already. And of course, just a reminder as well, I mentioned it yesterday, but we do have a new channel partner here for the NHL season for 22-23. I've partnered with Fanatics, official partner of the NHL. Massive amount of official NHL merchandise, all your jerseys, everything you want at great prices. There's some great deals going on right now. Of course, we will have the link for Top Shelf Hockey in the pinned comment. So of course, if you click on that link and make a purchase, it does help support the channel. There is a kickback from Fanatics to us, so anything that you can do to help support the channel is very much appreciated. Like I said, I personally purchase a lot of my NHL merchandise through Fanatics, and I would recommend you do as well. Lots of great stuff there to pick from. I know the Flames alternate jerseys they just announced, the new Blasty ones, they will be available through Fanatics, I believe, here in a couple of days' time for Flames fans. I might be looking for that. So check out Fanatics, the pinned comment down below for any merchandise you're considering making a purchase on. Now, of course, as I mentioned as well, some word on Maple Leafs and upcoming UFA Michael Bunting. Of course, Bunting was a nice find for them. Got him as a UFA leaving Arizona. He was a player in Arizona's system that never really got full opportunity, and I had a funny feeling once the Leafs signed him. I was like, I know he was going to take off and fit in well there. Seen him play the World Championships and a little bit in Arizona, and he was just a player that needed that right chance, and it's worked out well. Well, of course, they're going to want to keep him, of course, if possible. Important piece of that top line essentially was their Zach Hyman replacement on a fairly cheap contract, under $1 million for a couple of years, and that contract's coming to an end. We'll see what he does for production this year, but of course he's been, around a 60-point player, so that certainly justifies a pretty hefty raise. Now, Pierre LeBrun's reporting that he believes the Maple Leafs are interested in going long-term with Bunting, mainly because of the fact that it'll help keep down his AAV the longer they go. It'll help kind of offset things and bring the cap hit down some. So for a guy who's, he's kind of already into his later 20s, but at the same time, he's not, super old. The contract would kick in. He's going to be like between 27, 28 years of age. So it would probably take him till near the end of his career if he has an 8-year deal. No word on exactly negotiations kicking off yet, but Bunting himself said that he certainly, he's a Toronto boy, loves playing there, would love to sign long-term, get something done. At the same time, he's going to leave the business part to his agents. He's fine negotiating throughout the season, he said, and would like to get something accomplished. But of course, it's going to be challenging. Next year, the Maple Leafs already have $73.1 million committed in salary, and it's only 11 contracts. So you're looking at least 10 to 12 more contracts on the books, and they're only going to have less than $12 million in salary cap space. And if one of those players like Bunting, say he ends up taking $5-6 million, which really for a 60-point player is not unusual, even if he takes a little less than that, even if he takes 4.5 to 5, let's say, which to me is a good bargain deal for a first-line player putting up 60 points, that still leaves even less money. He's going to get more and more challenging here as time goes on until you see a big jump in cap to kind of surround your supporting cast, with much of, players that are making much money. They do have a lot of UFAs or expiring deals next year, including Samsonov, Justin Hall, Kerfoot, Engvall, David Koff, Obey Kubel, Aston Reese, who they just signed, and Dennis Malgin, who just signed. They got some of these guys, like Malgin's another guy on a cheap contract who's likely going to play with Tavares and Nylander, and if things go like they looked in the preseason, he could be in line for a hefty raise, and they're not going to want to lose him either, which is going to make things even more challenging. I really think because of everything with the cap in this situation, and you throw in the fact that Austin Matthews in his second to last year of his deal, it's important that they win and get some accomplishments in the playoffs now before things really go much further, because it's going to be that much more complicated for them to be able to keep a lot of these guys together to have a stronger group to try to win with. So we'll see how things go on the Bunting front, but we could hear negotiations taking place here and taking part as the season goes along. Now in Vancouver, there appears to be absolutely no hurry, according to Darren Dreger, for the Canucks and Bo Horvat to really continue negotiating or to get a deal done. We know they didn't want to go too far into the year without Miller and Horvat both unsigned beyond the current season. Since they got Miller done, it seems like they've really kind of taken a backseat to getting a Horvat deal done. And now it seems like the player in Bo Horvat, their captain, is probably going to have to soften a bit on his asking price and maybe give them a bit more of a team-friendly deal in order to stay and get an extension done with Vancouver. The Sean Couturier contract in Philly is certainly comparable given the fact that they play a similar style of game, solid two-way game. Of course, Couturier has more acknowledgments to his name with Selke nominations and that of such, but Horvat is still a pretty good two-way player and somewhat comparable. For him to get anything under $7 million is not going to happen. He's going to be looking for at least that much, I'm sure. There'd be lots of other teams interested should he actually hit the open market, and if the negotiations really don't go all that well, like the feeling that Dreger was talking about on some of Vancouver media that he's appeared on, said that by mid-season they kind of need to know where this is going. And if the Canucks are not in a playoff spot, you have to think that a Bo Horvat trade is very much a real possibility. Certainly not something that's at the forefront right now. I don't think we're going to see a Horvat trade anytime soon. It's really largely going to depend on the success or lack thereof of the team. But based on looking ahead to the season here, you get the Edmonton Oilers, the Calgary Flames. Vegas looked really good last night. LA, is supposed to be pretty strong. If they're in fifth place, for example, and we're getting into past the halfway point of the year, you might see a shift here, and a Bo Horvat trade might be that much more of a possibility. So it's a situation worth monitoring, but ever since that Miller deal was signed, it's certainly increased the odds of Horvat maybe not being able to stick around, even though I'm sure he's very much interested in doing so. And the other player I want to touch on was Jonathan Toews. Now, this is more of a speculation on Jeff Merrick's part. Of course, he and Elliot Friedman talked about this combination of the 32 Thoughts podcast and been on the Jeff Merrick show, which returned this week on Sportsnet, which airs every day. So you usually get at least a 15-20 minute segment of Merrick and Friedman discussing the latest news and rumors from around the league. And Merrick speculated about the futures of Jonathan Toews and Patrick Kane when they were previewing the Western Conference for the upcoming year, and wondered about a fit of Jonathan Toews with the Colorado Avalanche. We talked about the fact of some of the teams that were rumored to be in the mix on Patrick Kane, and of course, like I said, this is all early. Both players have a full no move. They will call their shot and have to approve everything. So it's very speculative at this point, and certainly far from being close to anything happening. I think if anything does happen, it's going to be late in the season around the deadline. They talked about the fact that Kane and Toews both made it known that they want to start the year in Chicago and give it their best shot. But of course, if the team is as weak as is expected to be after lots of losing, they're probably more likely than not to go to manager Kyle Davidson and say, okay, let's find a new spot for me to finish out the season and see if they can't make a playoff run, and then they can decide their futures beyond that in the offseason. They all could be two of the bigger names on the UFA market as well, depending on how things go. But of course, with the Avalanche losing Nazem Kadri, we'll have to see how Alex Newhook goes. But of course, if they decide that they want to upgrade and have a more experienced player there, and if Toews looks like he's having a decent season, he very well could be a potential upgrade. Now, keep in mind as well, I know a lot of people always leave comments saying, how could they afford that? He's got a $10 million contract. It's never going to work. You got to remember, teams accumulate cap space throughout the year. And of course, provided they're not an LTIR. And at the same time, you can have Chicago retain 50%, knocks it down, and sometimes you can get a third team involved to eat a chunk of that as well. They might be able to get Jonathan Toews for down to like $3 million or less. So it is very much possible. It just depends on how they go about it, but there's lots of ways to do salary cap gymnastics, so to speak, to make it work. So obviously we know the Avalanche are going to want to be going forward to try to defend their Stanley Cup championship, and this very well could be a player of interest to keep an eye on throughout the year to see if there might be a fit. To be completely honest, I wouldn't even rule out the possibility of them being interested in Kane. There's no way I don't think they could do both players, but certainly I think the Avalanche will be watching the Blackhawks closely, and they might be having some conversations later in the year once they kind of decide what they need to make a solid playoff run and have a shot at defending their championship title. So let me know your thoughts on everything discussed here today. Down in the comments, we'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with the latest news, rumors, and analysis on all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.